God doesn't give us more than we can handle. I've heard that statement all my life. And I've said it. I've believed it. When I've gone through trouble, I've reminded myself, God doesn't give me more than we can handle. But when I really started growing in my relationship with Jesus, when people would say that statement, it would just, when I would hear it, it would sound wrong in my spirit. There was just something that wasn't right about that statement. And as I've grown in my relationship, I've started to realize that, yes, things do happen to us all the time that are way more than we can handle. There's things in this world that I hear about that are beyond my comprehension of evil even. And to say that God doesn't give that person more than they can handle, it's, first of all, that's saying that God gives them that thing, that trouble. And the problem with that is it's hard to believe in a good God if we believe that he gives us the trouble. God doesn't give us those trouble. The devil tests us and tempts us in every single way possible to disregard our faith, to not believe in God. So that's one of the first things that's wrong with that statement. The second thing is, when we make that statement, it's really like we're trying to boast of ourselves, even though we're really not. I know the heart behind it. I know I never thought that I was trying to boast of myself when I would make that statement. I was, thanking God and praising him for that, for helping me to go through that. But it really is a boast of ourselves when you say God won't let me go through more than I can handle. Because I read through the scriptures, and every single time I see tribulation and I hear a story of something, it's always more than somebody can handle. For example, in Daniel 3, Nebuchadnezzar's a king, and he made an image of gold. And King Nebuchadnezzar, he sent word to gather all the superpower, the influential superpowers of the time, all the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, all the officials of the provinces, to come to this dedication that the king had made and he had set up. So they all came, and he decreed that at a certain time, when they played all these different instruments, that they would fall down. This was the decree. They were supposed to fall down and worship the image of gold. And if they didn't do that, then they would be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And of course, the story goes that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't do that because they served only, the Lord their God. And because of that, they got put into the fiery furnace that was, hotter than any furnace has ever been. Because what would happen is they went in to the fire and they didn't burn. God kept them safe. And, because they wouldn't burn, the king kept making it hotter and hotter and hotter until finally he gave up because they just weren't getting burned because God saved them. That is not a situation where God put them in more. No, that was not God that put them in that situation. That was the devil that put them in that situation because he didn't want them serving the God. He didn't want people to know. He'd rather a man boast of himself and have somebody boast of a man than boast of the one true God who raises the dead. And then you have, for example, in Daniel 6, where another firm decree was made that couldn't be changed. And it was whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except for the king. So there was a 30-day basically decree that was made that anybody who petitioned any god or man other than the king, then they were to be cast in a den of lions. As you know, the story goes, Daniel didn't obey the decree, and he was tossed into the lion's den. But God rescued him, and he was not eaten. In both of those situations, they were both given, all of them were given way more than they can handle. But God but God delivered them. But God didn't put them in those situations. And what really drove it home for me to just get rid of that belief that God doesn't give me more than I can handle is when I read in 2 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 8 to 11. In the New King James Version, it says, "For we do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, of our trouble which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened beyond measure, above strength, so that we despaired even our life." And when I read that at first, I stopped and I thought, man, they were burdened beyond measure. But that doesn't match with the statement that says God won't give us more than we can handle. They were burdened above strength, and they were despaired, which means they were hopeless of life itself. And none of those statements correspond with that statement that, I've used or heard in the past of God doesn't give us more than we can handle. Clearly, they were given more than they can handle. And then it says, yes, we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead, who delivered us from so great a death and does deliver us, in whom we trust, and that he will still deliver us. And I just want to kind of give another interpretation of that. I also read it in the Voice, because when I read it, I was like, what? Wait, because I think of Paul as this, great man of faith, and, all these people in the Bible of great men of faith, and they were, but their faith grew in this moment. Like, this is how God grows our faith. And he doesn't give us the trials to grow it, but during those moments of trial and during those moments of testing that the devil wants to throw those things at us, that's when we grow in endurance. I believe that's in Romans 5. I can't remember the exact verses, but it talks about, I will rejoice in suffering, because suffering produces endurance, and endurance, patience, and patience, character, I think, and then character, hope, or, yes, it's in Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5. It says, "And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. Now hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who is given to us." And back to 2 Corinthians. So the other interpretation that I had read was in the Voice, because when I read that, I was like, am I read that right? Like, they clearly were given more than they can handle. They were put through more than they can handle. And in the Voice translation, it says, "My brothers and sisters," this is in 2 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 8 to 10, actually. "My brothers and sisters, we have to tell you that when we were in Asia, the troubles we faced were nearly more than we can handle. The burdens we bore nearly crushed us. Our strength dwindled to nothing. For while we weren't sure we wouldn't make it through the whole ordeal, we thought we would have to serve out our death sentences right then and there." So they were to the point that they thought they were pretty much preparing themselves for death. They thought they were going to die. And it says, "As a result, we realized that we can no longer rely on ourselves, that we must trust solely in God, who possesses the power to raise the dead." So that right there, to no longer rely on ourselves, to say that God doesn't give us more than we can handle, causes us to think that we can rely on ourselves and in God. But God says, no, don't even rely on yourself. Rely on me. When you go through those troubles and you go through those hardships, you don't have to do it on your own. I don't call you to walk in that trial and that fire by yourself, because I will save you. In those moments, you come to me and I will save you, and you will learn to trust solely in me who raises from the dead, in every situation when we go to him. And I found that true. There's so many scriptures that I can bring up, especially in the Psalms, when it talks about, when we go to God or we meet him in our secret place, or, even just through my own example in my life, when I've gone through something, immediately in that moment, whether I have time to step away or not, either I go to the bathroom or just, in my mind, to redirect my mind and to focus my mind on God and not on the situation. To put my trust in him and to talk to him about the situation and remind myself that God doesn't put me through that situation. The devil is trying to tempt my faith in God. He's trying to tempt my trust in God. He's trying to make me not trust God he's trying to make God seem not trustworthy. And by blaming him, that makes God not trustworthy. But no, we shouldn't blame God in those moments. We should run to him with open arms, and we should not rely on ourselves. And so that's my learning of, the incorrect statement or belief that God doesn't give us more than we can handle. Because people around this world are constantly going through things more than what they can handle. But God is able to deliver us from all of them. But God is able to take us to walk us through that situation and stay with us through the fire. That way, when we come out of it, we have endurance, and much more do we gain. Things that are eternal do we gain. And it's not that we should want to go through trials so we can build endurance, but when we go through them, we have a different perspective of, other than feeling down or sad or hopeless, because we have hope. And our hope is not in ourselves that we have the strength to do it. Our hope is that we can turn to God and trust in him, and he will fight our battles for us as we look to him to save our souls.